we are going to have a problem with with the attempts by China to isolate Taiwan and to subjugate it. And what we need to do is work out a plan now, because we've seen what happens when you allow authoritarian states to get away with doing things which are very bad for the international order.
How worried are we about this? Because there is saber rattling. We've heard today described as saber rattling by China in response to Nancy Pelosi's presence. Is it possible it could go further than that, or is this just what we'd expect from a visit like that?
I think it's probably what we'd expect from a visit, and it certainly won't go further before the 20th Party Congress later this year. China seeks to isolate Taiwan to make it easier to subjugate it in the medium to long term. And therefore, any high-profile visit they're going to be furious about, because it makes the process of subjugating and isolating Taiwan more difficult.
The problem is that, for very understandable reasons, the position of a country like Britain and indeed America is one of deliberate ambiguity. We sort of recognise Taiwan as an independent nation. We don't come out and say it. Is that a problem, do you think? At some point, do we need to remove the ambiguity?
I think that no, I certainly wouldn't do that now. But I think in the longer term, I mean, personally, I think if we knew beforehand, which we did, that the Chinese were going to tear up the one country, two systems in Hong Kong, we should have turned around and said, if you're going to tear up Hong Kong's autonomy, if you're going to do away with that, we will recognise Taiwan. And I think that might have made the Chinese think twice. It might have made them angry, but it might have also made them realise that maybe they should be obeying international treaties and not reneging on them. So I think that is one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it in the long term, we are going to have a problem with with the attempts by China to isolate Taiwan and to subjugate it. And what we need to do is work out a plan now, because we've seen what happens when you allow authoritarian states to get away with doing things which are very bad for the international order and which are very bad for countries around them.
And the question then follows, really, that if China ever were to consider a military intervention to claim Taiwan or reclaim Taiwan as they would see it, what follows from the West? Would we really collectively fight China over Taiwan? The answer feels like the answer is probably no.
Well, I think the US probably would at the moment. Now, whether that's still the case in 5 years, because as you say, I think there's this ambiguity, which I think is actually pretty sensible given the circumstances. We've seen the damage that dependency on authoritarian states that then break the international rules happens. We've seen it with Russian oil, coal and gas in Europe, and it is one reason why we have very high inflation at the moment and are living through an international political and economic crisis. That is going to be 10 times worse if China attempts has a serious attempt at subjugating Taiwan, not only because Taiwan supplies many of the world's semiconductors, but also because we would then have to take sanctions against China, and the effect on international trade would be devastating. So one of the ways around that is what we need to be doing in the short to medium term is working out our dependency on China. I produced a report for the Henry Jackson Society a couple of years ago that showed a truly staggering dependency on Chinese imports into this country, including in critical national infrastructure. And we have to find an intelligent and sensible way to wean ourselves off those, or at least find a diversity of supply in order to protect ourselves. And we should be learning from the Russian experience, not thinking it's a one-off, because it isn't.
That's a very good point. Just before you go, Bob Seeley, you're a Liz Truss supporter. Very good news for you in the Times today of how far she is ahead of Rishi Sunak. But there was a bit of a mess yesterday with the policy she had on public sector pay. Brandon Lewis told us this morning, he's a Liz Truss supporter, the public sector pay plan was a suggestion. They put "if" in the press release. They didn't really mean cutting £9 billion from public sector pay. Would it have not been better? You're a straight-talking person, Bob Seeley. If Liz Truss just held hands up and said, you know what, this was a policy, there's some merit to it, but on reflection, it was wrong and I take it away, rather than pretending it said something it didn't.
I thought that's what she was saying. I mean, look, Liz has had a very good campaign. Yesterday was one bad day, and her campaign will move on, and we'll all move on from it and learn the experience. Look, she is an ideas person. She loves good policy, she loves good ideas, because that makes a better government, and better government is what we should always be striving for in this country. So it had some merit. It wasn't particularly well presented. It could have been better thought through. It wasn't the greatest day in the campaign, but hey, we move on. And she's had many very, very good days, and I hope we have many more good days to come.
Bob Seeley, good to speak to you. Thank you for joining us today.